What is up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a little story time video. A time when I almost got scammed out of getting my security deposit back. So stay tuned to find out the story. And if you enjoy content like this and want to support me and my channel, make sure to subscribe down below. Hit the thumbs up to show me some love and leave me a comment if you have a story you would like to share. So let's get right into the video. This was my second apartment I lived in New York City. I was moving into a four bedroom, two bathroom apartment, sort of in, um, right on the border of Bushwick and an area, it's a little controversial, called East Williamsburg, which is sort of a gentrified term created by real estate developers in the outskirts of Williamsburg that has never really been very residential, um, but is sort of being gentrified now, but is sort of at the outskirts of Bushwick and Williamsburg, um, right here. This is Williamsburg, this is Bushwick, um, known as East Williamsburg. Very controversial though, and it's not, it's sort of just, a new neighborhood that has sort of just been created out of thin air. Anyway, but sort of right on the border, about literally a block away between the recognized borders of Williamsburg and Bushwick. When I moved into this building, um, I basically was in a situation where I did not have very good credit. And in New York City, it is almost impossible to be a renter here if you do not have good credit. I mean, it's very hard to be a renter here, period. But basically, if you don't have solid income and credit, it's almost impossible to get an apartment. The credentials are pretty cut and dry, as far as income goes. Legally here, it's actually cut and dry. There's actually laws on the books, and it's to prevent landlords from being discriminatory. Basically, you have to make 40 times the monthly rental income in order to qualify for whatever apartment it may be. So, for example, if you're looking to rent an apartment that costs $1,000 per month, which doesn't really exist, but in fantasy land, or a room in an apartment, right, that costs $1,000 a month, you would need to make $40,000 per year in order to qualify for that apartment or that portion of the lease. That's how it works legally. So, and you can also figure out from your income, you can kind of work backwards to see what you would qualify for. So, for example, if you earned $60,000 a year, you would legally qualify for an apartment up to $1,500 a month in rent. Make sense? So that's how it works as far as income. Now, credit doesn't have as strict cut and dry rules like that. It's more of a gray area, but generally you need to have good credit. Usually landlords look for credit that's about 680 or above, I would say, is my experience. Definitely has to be, I would say, at least 650 or above, definitely in the 600s. Some look for 700 and above, though. It really depends landlord to landlord what their specific credit um, qualifications are. Some are more flexible than others. Some provide like a range. Some have a more strict number. It just really depends. Um, and some also have sort of flexible options. And what that means is, like, let's say, you make enough money to live in the apartment, but your credit isn't great for whatever reason. There might be other ways that you can kind of supplement that. One might be what is known as a guarantor, which is sort of like a co-signer, basically, for a lease. Um, so, the other person, um, would basically be on the hook if you defaulted. It's a little bit more lengthy of a process though for a guarantor application. And I believe a guarantor usually has to make 80 times the rent, for example. So, like in that example we just cited, for an apartment or part of a lease that would be $1,000 a month, that person would need to make $80,000 a year. And sometimes the credit also, like their credit might have to be greater. So, just depends. And back then, there's been some new rental laws that have gone on the books since this happened back in 2018. In 2019, there was a bunch of rental laws that changed some things, which are good, um, but have some unintended consequences. Because one of the, basically, I sort of negotiated one of these things because I don't really have someone who, because a guarantor is sort of the easiest way to kind of get around that if you don't have great credit, but you have the income and you have everything else, which was the position I was in. And so I sort of negotiated, and one of these other sort of loopholes that a lot of times people will use are paying multiple security deposits. So, so instead of paying 1 month of a security deposit, which is the typical amount that you would pay, maybe paying 2 or 3 months worth of a security deposit. So if the apartment is $1,000 a month, you would pay, maybe $2,000 or $3,000 worth of a deposit, as sort of a guarantee, right? So that was basically the situation that I ended up being in with this apartment. So they had sort of offered me um, paying 3 times or 3 months worth of security. I had negotiated it down to 2 months, so paying this my rent was 1,100 a month, so paying 2,200. And so yeah, so that's basically, so I negotiated to 2 months. So I paid $2,200 of a security deposit. And when I paid my security deposit, I paid it in cash. And the reason I paid it in cash was because and this is true for a lot of times, you have to pay either in a cashier's check or in cash because um, basically they want to see that you actually have the money. So um, they won't accept payment in some form that's like a credit where the actual money is coming later. Because like if you pay by an actual check, or you pay by debit card, or you're paying by credit card, or you're paying um, through, some kind of an online portal, which a lot of places, that's how you'll actually pay your rent in other months. If you're paying through some kind of means like that, the actual money is leaving your bank account, um, not instantaneously, right? So, or it's like it's a loan basically, like, right? It's a promise of payment. So when you're paying something in cash or you're paying it with a cashier's check, the money has to actually be in your account at the time of transaction in order to do that. And obviously with cash, right? Like you have to, like, literally, like, there's the money. And at your bank, a cashier's check, you have to actually have the money in your account for the banker to issue you that check. So it's basically a guarantee. And so that's like very normal. But because of that, it's always a hassle. And like with a cashier's check, not only do you have to go to the bank and wait in line and, do that whole thing in order to get a cashier's check, because the banker has to actually verify you have the money in your account. It also costs money because I forget, but they're not free. Cashier's checks, I think, cost something like $10 per check or something like that. They're not free though. And so I was like, well, why would I pay? And I would have had to get three separate cashier's checks, one for my first month of rent, one for each deposit. So I was like, why would I pay, $25 to get these checks when I can just get the money in cash. I still had to go to the bank, because you can't get that much cash out of the ATM. Um, but it would be free, and it still is faster um than getting the cashier's check. So I ended up getting it in cash. Although it is so nerve-wracking walking around with that much cash on you, I feel like. But, I literally just went right from the bank to my appointment to sign my lease and all of that stuff. But so did all that, got my keys, signed my lease, paid my deposit, paid my first month of rent. Um, but basically what happened in all of that was I forgot to get a receipt, and also they didn't give me a receipt, which is weird. And and part of it is on me. Like, obviously I should have asked for a receipt. I should have remembered, and even like in the days after I should have remembered, like, oh, I didn't get a receipt, and I should have, like, emailed, called, whatever, to get one. I totally forgot. And I'm not saying it as an excuse or whatever. But I was in the middle of moving. I'm sure, as anybody who's ever moved knows, it's stressful. You have a million things on your mind. You have a, to-do list a mile long. There's a lot going on. So things can slip your mind very easily. And especially like, because I was doing, I was moving all by myself. I was doing everything, and it was, there's a lot going on. So I totally just forgot. And because they didn't give me a receipt, I just didn't think much of it. But then I think I realized, yeah, I guess I didn't really think much about it until, until it was time to move out. And the management, and I will say, like, I definitely knew, I think, pretty early into living in this apartment that I was not going to renew my lease there. And not that it was horrible. I don't want to um, it wasn't like, a horrible experience. Like, it was fine for what it was. It just wasn't like an experience that I was like, I'm definitely going to be living here for, another year kind of a thing. The management was very unresponsive. Like literally, I always was like, if there's an actual emergency, like, I literally don't know if what's going to happen, because like, there was, like, for some reason when we moved in, our gas wasn't turned on, and like we couldn't get an answer as to like how to actually do that for like days and days, and it was just this whole thing. And like, just for like very basic things, like, we could not get in touch with anyone there. But then, it was one of those things when, when they needed something, they would be like down your throat. And when it was, and they would send like emails every month to everyone in the building about, it's time to pay your rent and all that kind of stuff. And like, just very patronizing. And they were just incredibly disorganized, very unresponsive. Like, it was a disaster, and just not a place that I wanted to like continue to live. And yeah, so I knew that I wasn't going to renew my lease. And so when it came, and I knew because I remembered, and I always like make note of this kind of stuff, like when I sign a lease and whatever, like, how many days notice do I have to give and whatever. And so I knew it was 60 days notice for move out. And so when it was coming around that time, I went back and like looked at the lease to figure out how do I give my notice, and what is everything that I have to do in order to do that. And so um I went back, and I wasn't even sure, like, who do I even talk to, because they just literally didn't even have like a management person. Like, they had because they had like the person who would always email us didn't really even speak English. Like, I could barely even comprehend really what he would be saying half the time. And people who would come to our building, which happened maybe like twice in the whole time I lived there, would have like, it wouldn't be like that person. And I don't know, like, they just didn't have like a centralized team or person, or I didn't know who our super was. So I had no idea even like who I was supposed to like tell. And even like, I had at one point tried to like talk to the people who I had signed all my paperwork with, like, early on and living there about some of this stuff. And they said, "Oh, like, we have nothing to really do with that. Like, they contract out management responsibilities. Like, the people who own the building subcontract out the management to like some management company. So the people managing the building are not the people who actually own the building, if that makes any sense. And even like the people who are doing all the paperwork stuff are not the people who own the building. So like everything is a subcontract basically. And so even it makes sense for like the management is not like they're not invested because they don't own any of this stuff. They're just being paid to like send a couple emails basically. So yeah, so basically I wasn't even sure like, do I email the people who I signed all the paperwork with? Do I email the management? Because they don't own the property. So like I don't know who's the right people to talk to. Um, so I wasn't sure. And so I went back through my lease and it said that you had to give notice in writing and like it gave this like crazy address. So I was like, well, I'm just gonna send emails to like all of these different people that way, like, because I was just terrified of them, like, saying that I didn't send notice in time, kind of a thing, and then trying to get me on the hook for, like, an additional month of rent. Because basically it's like if you don't give proper notice, then they can put you on the hook for like another month of rent, kind of a thing, right? So I was terrified of that happening. So I literally just sent emails to like all the crazy management people, the paperwork people, just like anybody who I'd ever talked to who was affiliated with this apartment. And then I sent an actual like physical letter to this address, which I think it was just like a technicality kind of thing in the lease, just for legality purposes. But I did it anyway, like I said, just in case, just to cover my bases, so I could say I did it. Like, so I did. And yeah, and uh I never really got like an answer or anything from anyone, or like any sort of move out instructions or anything, like nothing. So I was like, okay, I guess, then I'm moving out. So, I've communicated it, so whatever. And but then in the midst of kind of like all of this happening, I realized that like as I was like, looking at my lease and all of this different paperwork, I realized that I um, never got a receipt for my security deposit payments, and I was freaking out. And I real because I and then I like in my memory went back through, and I was like, "Son of a bitch, I must have never gotten a receipt." And like, because I was looking for it when I was going through all of my lease and all my documents and stuff, and like, um, and I think I like asked them to send me a copy, and like they didn't ever respond. And so I was like, okay, like because I was definitely really like, I think over the course of the year, just knowing how unresponsive they were, I was really nervous about getting my deposit back. And like, not even just in a timely manner, because I already knew it wasn't going to be in a timely manner. I was already like mentally prepared for that. I was just like, am I going to get it back? It's going to be a fight to get it back. I already know. And I don't even know, again, who am I supposed to talk to get it back? And it seemed like it seemed like the paperwork people that I signed my lease with did say everything has to go through the management, which is still so weird because it's like I signed the paperwork through you all though, so shouldn't you be the ones that giving me my money back, right? Like if I paid you, wouldn't you be giving me my money back? What does the management have to do with any of that? But I was like, oh great, because they're just so unresponsive, and so I knew it was going to be a fight to get it back. But so because I didn't have this receipt and everything, I was like, what do I, I'm like terrified. And $2,200 was a lot of money to me also. Like I couldn't really afford to not get it back, if that makes sense. And so I came up with a plan. I was like, okay, and like since then, and I also alluded to the fact that some new rental laws had been put in place, and this was 2019 at this point, and like were just being put in place actually at this at this juncture. which basically now it's illegal to you cannot pay or ask for more than 1 month's worth of rent um and one security deposit up front. So like I guess 2 months worth of rent in some way, shape, or form. So like you can't ask for like first and last and a security. You can only ask for like first and last or first and security, or it's got to be like you have to pick two basically. Um, so you can't ask for multiple months of security anymore. And it's meant to close that loophole of like exploitation. But the problem is if you don't have, because like the reason that that even happened was because it was a bargaining chip for me having bad credit. So now the problem is just that like that's no longer a bargaining chip option if you have bad credit because it's illegal to pay more than 1 month's worth of security, which I'm not sure if I would again just because of this experience. But it's also like okay, there's not as many like alternative bargaining chips though. So yeah, so basically I was like, okay, what I'm gonna do is because this was like the second to last month, and I was like, I'm just not gonna pay um my last month of rent. I'm gonna, say that I paid 2 months, and even like I remember, I forgot to mention, so like because when I was having a discussion, I remember when I was signing my lease, the person I was talking to was saying that like, if as long as you're like a good tenant and, pay your rent on time and, you know, aren't like making the management company's life hell and, all that kind of stuff, right? Like, they'll probably let you use that second security deposit as your last month anyway. Um, And, of course, though, I had like the worst management company ever, and there was no such like offer of that. But I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna assume that that's the case. And so I told them that like they, had said that I could do that and like that that's what I was gonna do. And I was using that second security deposit as my last month of rent. I mean, it all is gonna equal out anyway, right? So, um, I just knew I was never gonna get it back, and especially because of this receipt and all that. And like I said, I should have gotten the receipt. Like, I next time I'm like 100% I'm gonna be like, I mean, I feel like I learned a lot of lessons from this, but I was also only like, how old was I when this happened? 22? Yeah, I mean, I was super young. Um, so, oh my God. So basically, um, then, I did that. I sent them that email. They were like really pissed, but I was like, whatever. And and then once I moved out and everything, and you know, I knew I was gonna have to fight to get back my actual last month's 1100 security deposit, and I did. I called and texted and emailed and like everything. Because legally in New York City, in New York State, you have 2 weeks, your landlord has 2 weeks to return your security deposit. And anything that they don't return, they have to give you an itemized list as to what the deductions are for. And yeah, just nothing. And I gave them the 2 weeks, but then yeah, there was nothing. And so I was, left, right, and center trying to get in touch, and they were like dodging my calls and everything. And like, um, yeah. And then eventually, like, this was maybe like 6 weeks after I moved out, 6 or 8 weeks, something like that. And finally, my mom actually called um, the super, and he picked up, I guess, like the first time she called him. And he actually said that he answered because he didn't recognize the number. But that's the welcome to New York, like welcome to shitty landlords. Like that's how these people work. They recognize your number because that's And I was watching a documentary actually about the worst landlords in New York, and they say this, like, because they learn the tenants' phone numbers, or they, they put them in their contacts or whatever, and they know who's calling, and so they just like will dodge your calls. Like they should be answering. Those are the calls they should be answering, but instead they'll just dodge them. And so so they knew that I was contacting them and they were just avoiding me. And then, when my mom calls, then they answer and then, can't do much to get out of it. And so basically my mom, got them to get me my money. And, I mean, what are they going to do when somebody's mom calls? You know what I mean? Um, so, thanks, mom. And, she got me my money. And within a couple days, then I got my money back. Oh, my God. But that was like, it was so much like harassing to get that $1,100 back, but got it back, learned my lesson. Um, but I definitely was a little scared that I wasn't going to get it back. I mean, I was going to get it back because I would have like taken them to housing court or whatever if I needed to. Um, but it just it sucks that so many people are in that kind of position. And you know, yeah, you're like a 22-year-old kid basically, and people will try to put you in this like exploitative position, or they hope you will give up, or um and I'm lucky that I had my mom in the first place, um to basically take over, since they recognized my number and were dodging me on purpose. And yeah, but that's a story of, I don't know, living in New York, trying to get my security deposit back, when it was being withheld. And yeah, so I'm always a lot more careful now with that kind of stuff. And um, yeah, but hopefully this was interesting. Oh my God. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you later.